What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and I wanted to talk about some homebrew rules of mine. Because if you don't know, I actually started a brand new campaign that I'm streaming over on my Twitch channel, but the first episode's already out. We streamed it We streamed it 2 weeks ago on Twitch, and the edited down version of that is actually available on the second channel, which is Nerd Immersion Plays. I'll have a link to it in the description, but that's just cut up with breaks and stuff removed. So if you want to catch up on that, that's available. We'll also be streaming it live tonight, the 24th, so it's every Wednesday. It'll be going live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you'd like to check out episode 2, that's available for you. Also, because of requests from people and viewers like you, I actually made it into a podcast, too. So the first ever Nerd Immersion podcast. I'll also put a link to that in the description, so if you want to just hear it in audio-only format, that's also a thing. But why am I telling you so much about this? Well, I thought it would be interesting to talk about homebrew rules that I'm using in that game. So I thought I was going to have 10, and depending on how you look at it, I might have 10, but basically it's like 9 homebrew rules that I'm using in that game. And I thought this would be interesting because we're 10 years into the world of D&D 5e. I should tell you it's a Phandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk campaign. So for those of you unfamiliar, the first 5 chapters are basically Lost Mines of Phandelver, and then the remaining chapters after that take place in the whole Shattered Obelisk part of things. So that's what we're playing through. I have a wonderful cast, a ton of awesome people who you may know from a variety of different places on the internet. But yeah, I wanted to go through my homebrew rules that I'm using in that game because we're 10 years into 5e, and I feel like at this point a lot of different people have started to fix the issues that they see with 5e, and we tried a couple new things here that I haven't done before and then some standard ones. So I'll just go into them and kind of explain what's going on. So the first one, some people might not even realize that it's technically a homebrew rule, and that is potions as a bonus action. That's a pretty commonplace rule at this point. I think the first place a lot of people saw it was Critical Role from back in the day, so that became kind of a commonplace thing people do. But either way, drinking a potion as a bonus action is a pretty commonplace rule. It's in Baldur's Gate, so that is one of the rules that I use in my game. However, I did tweak it and add a little bit more. Oh, and I guess I should say, drinking it for yourself is a bonus action. Administering it to an ally is an action. But I added a little tweak that if you drink it yourself as an action, you get the full amount of healing. Whereas if you drink it as a bonus action, you roll the dice. So if you really want to be double fisting potions, one as a bonus action, one as an action, you can do that. The action one's full healing. The bonus action is you roll. Pretty standard. But I added that extra little bit with the full heal on that, which can be very good depending on when you're using much stronger potions later on. The second one that I full-on adopted from Tales of the Valiant is Attunement slots for your magic items are tied to your proficiency bonus. This does mean that you will start out with less attunable magic item slots than you would have if you were to play with base 5e, which is 3 slots. But at a point, I think it's level 9, your proficiency bonus goes up to 4, you would now have an ability to add more attunement slots. And I've also toyed around with the concept. I mean, we'd have to tweak this if anybody was playing an Artificer, where we'd give them an additional bonus to that. But, you could also toy around with feats or things that say, okay, now that becomes 1 plus your proficiency bonus to add that extra attunement slot. And I thought this was pretty good because it just, again, it starts off a little bit slower. It's a little bit more management on your end. But, usually the levels from level 1 to 5 go relatively quickly. And then all of a sudden you're back at 3 attunement slots, which is what you've been used to the whole time. Could also be really good for newer players who may not have the mental capacity to handle all of the decisions of what are the 3 items I'm going to attune to. You only give them 2. That works out. But later on, they can work their way up to 4 and all the way up to 6 at much, much later levels. So that's a little bit of a tweak there. Another one that I guess is technically a homebrew rule is we're adopting the rules they just recently updated in the 1D&D Healing, which is that Healing Word is 2d4 Cure Wounds is 2d8. So instead of 1d8 plus your spellcasting modifier, it's 2d8, and then for each upcast you go, it's 2, right? So casting a second level Cure Wounds heals for 4d8 plus your spellcasting modifier, as opposed to the original 2. And then again, there's tweaks to Mass Healing Word and Mass Cure Wounds as well that kind of follow along with that. And I thought that that was a pretty nice update because healing isn't the best in 5e. We've talked about this in the past. More often than not, you were better off to just leave somebody down or like let them get low. There's no preemptive healing. It was all reactive healing. You went down to 0, I'll pop you back up, and then we'll keep fighting, but it doesn't make sense for me to preemptively heal you. It makes more sense for me to just keep you alive so you don't fail your death saving throws, and that's that. To that point, we also adapted the 1 D&D version of the Paladin's Lay on Hands, which just basically makes it a bonus action. That was kind of to help. We do have a Paladin in the game. We also have a Life Cleric, so that was to help even out the healing a little bit. They can now heal as a bonus action. I've created magic items in the past that allowed Paladins to just heal as a bonus action. Kind of just makes sense to give them that, in my opinion. So that's what we did. Speaking of going down and healing and death saving throws, one of the things we talked about was the concept of what a lot of people, I've heard it called boomeranging, a more accurate term would be yo-yoing, which is where you're down and up and down and up and down and up. This meaning when you go down to 0 hit points and you pop back up because somebody heals you or helps you or whatever it is, and then you go back down and you pop back up and you go back down and you pop back up. And essentially, you've been potentially, in some instances, on the brink of death 3 to 4 times in a fight, potentially. And all you have to do is go get a nappy nap for 8 hours and everything's better. So we actually put it to a poll in the Twitch chat last time to see where we landed because we had a couple of different ideas. One of them was we adopted the Baldur's Gate 3 model, which is when you go down and come back up, you lose your action on that turn, and all you have is a bonus action. That's what Baldur's Gate does, and it does make it feel pretty impactful for when you go down. Again, potentially encouraging people more to do preemptive heals, because that'll keep people in the fight so they don't lose that action. That was not what we chose. We also got it down to 2 other options, which were exhaustion-based. Exhaustion base 1 was when you go down, and when you come back up, you have a level of exhaustion immediately. So if you were to go down 3 times in a fight, heal, go to 0, heal, go to 0, heal, go to 0, whatever it is, go down 3 times, you'd have 3 levels of exhaustion when you got out of that fight. That was one option where it triggers immediately. The other option was what I like to call like an adrenaline factor after combat, which was whatever levels of exhaustion you take in that fight, they don't hit you till post-combat. So the adrenaline is pumping through your character's body during the combat, and then when combat ends, all of the levels of exhaustion that they potentially accrued during that combat hit them all at once. So let's say you did get that scenario where you went down to 0 3 times. You'd finish out the fight with the adrenaline pumping through your body, and then when the fight ends and you start to realize what happens and the bloodlust dies out, bam, 3 levels of exhaustion. It also has the potential to be a really cool moment where somebody basically went down 6 times, potentially, in a fight, fought basically to help save their friends, and then dies immediately after the combat because they've stacked up so many levels of exhaustion. That's where we ultimately landed, was having it hit after combat. And I'm very curious to see how this goes, especially with the tweaked healing, which again goes to the point of helping people choose to have preemptive healing as a proactive measure as opposed to reactive. Speaking also again of death saving throws, this is not an uncommon one, but I wanted to make it official, is that death saving throw rolls are between me and that player. It does not get public knowledge to the other people. So again, we're playing online, so they'll either send me their rolls personally or they'll just click how to send it directly. We're just kind of using it via D&D Beyond. By the way, their character sheets are available on D&D Beyond. I'll have links to those if you guys want to see those, or they're in the description of the game over on the second channel. But it's that the other players at the table don't know how close you are to death. Because I've been in games where death saving throws are public, and basically people are like, you have one pass and no fails. I'll get you next turn. If I can kill this guy now or do something now, I can just heal you in a second. But let me focus down and take down this enemy before I come over and get you. You have one pass and no fails. You can afford to fail. Even if you roll a natural 1, you can afford to fail it. Will be good. And with them death saving throw rolls being behind the screen or just direct to the DM, then people don't know how close is he to dying. It's been 2 turns. Did he fail twice? Did he succeed twice? Who knows? And that could be a really fun dynamic. Again, especially with the exhaustion rules that we're playing with, the adjustments to healing, I think that'll be pretty cool. Another thing that's also pretty common and basically has been adopted by D&D at this point is the concept of a feat at first level, right? Certain backgrounds now give you a feat at first level, but several of my players did not choose backgrounds that grant them a feat at first level. So I said, obviously, you get a feat at first level to just kind of keep everything even. And again, kind of on the power level that D&D expects things to be at. So that's a pretty commonplace one. I've talked about that years ago, and it's basically something I've been instituting since then. Let's see, what other homebrew rules did we do? Oh, contested checks. This is another one that I learned of recently that I thought was really interesting, which was whenever somebody goes to like lie to somebody or see if somebody's telling the truth or not or any of that kind of stuff. If like, hey, they're like, hey, is he telling the truth? And they're like, I make an insight check, and then I roll a deception check, presumably. The characters or the players automatically assume that they have something to hide because I rolled, right? I feel like you've probably seen that in your games, either as a player or a DM, right? I go to roll, and you're like, oh, he's obviously lying because he rolled a deception check versus my insight, so it's a lie. So I forget where I heard this from, but basically the concept of making all social checks contested checks all the time, regardless. So, hey, you want to lie to this person, it's a contested check. You want to try to tell if they're true, I'll make my check on my end, and I'll just give you the answer based on whether who succeeded on the contested check. That way you don't know if they're lying or I'm telling the truth. It's just always a contested check. You might get more information out of something one way or another, but it's not a guarantee that just because I rolled they're lying. It kind of removes that. And again, I know that's metagaming knowledge, but sometimes players just find that hard to separate that out of their brain. So that's a thing that we do. We do have a Phoenix Soul Sorcerer in the game who is using my updated version of the Phoenix Soul Sorcerer to play, which has a couple small tweaks to make it a little more on power level with the other sorcerers. And they told me that they really like the wild magic rules. Well, for a game that I had been running for years, I actually developed a fire magic specific wild magic surge table. And I said, would you want to use that? And they said, absolutely. So we're implementing that. That I think is available. If it is publicly available, or if it's not, I'll put a link in the description so you guys can go check that out. But it also, I said, how do you want to handle wild magic surges? Basically, they said if I cast a spell, I roll a d20. If I roll a 1, it triggers a surge. But if I don't roll a 1, then it becomes 1 to 2 triggers a surge. And then if I cast another spell and I don't get it, then it's 1, 2, 3. And it kind of scales upward. And we actually did manage to get a wild magic surge in last game, which led to a really interesting interaction between all of the characters, which was pretty cool. And lastly, we are using my class-specific trinkets. If you've seen my games for a while, you know that I developed a list of 100 class-specific trinkets for all the classes, including the Artificer and the Blood Hunter. And these are a variety. They're kind of almost like common magic items in some instances. They could just be fun, little kind of goofy trinkets, but some of them have a little bit more gravitas to them, depending on how they were written. And the players can just find them in the course of the game. They got them at character creation, but also as a part of Twitch chat, people are able to donate the Twitch points to give people trinkets if they so choose. So that's another homebrew rule. We didn't get anything too over the top. One is like our cleric, for example, has a tattoo on his chest that functions as his holy symbol, so he's never without it. That's a fun one. The sorcerer has a set of cookware. He's like a noble. The cookware actually like makes his meals for him and cooks it for him, which kind of plays really well into his backstory about being a noble who doesn't really know how to do anything on his own. So those are the homebrew rules that I'm using in my Phandelver and Below the Shattered Obelisk campaign. Like I said, links to the podcast, links to the edited down version in the description. Again, you can also head over to our Twitch channel to watch the second episode live tonight. We hope to see you there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.